Before a single bullet was fired, the Western Front of World War I had already declared war on the men sent to fight it. The Alpine corridors, those brutal, fog-draped ridgelines where French colonial labourers hauled ammunition, supplies, and, well, the dead, were not forgiving classrooms. They were killing grounds of cold, and the men who survived them carried knowledge that no military manual had ever thought to write down. This is the story of that knowledge. This is Fieldcraft Chronicles. Imagine, just for a moment, the pre-dawn hours on a high Alpine pass in the winter of 1916. The temperature has dropped to -20 degrees Celsius. The wind, what the locals called la bise noire, the black breeze, cuts through standard issue wool blankets like tissue paper. Around a half-built supply depot, men from Morocco, Senegal, Algeria, and Madagascar huddle not around flame, fire would invite German artillery, but around something far older and honestly far more powerful. They are weaving. Threads from another world, the knowledge they carried. Among the tirailleurs, colonial infantry conscripted from France's African territories, were men who had grown up understanding fibre, the way a carpenter understands grain in wood. The Berber soldiers from Morocco's Atlas Mountains carried a cultural memory of hambel weaving, a dense, double-sided textile technique used to construct tent panels that withstood Saharan windstorms. The principle was not decorative, it was engineering. Standard single-ply cloth is permeable to wind because its weave creates micro-channels through which cold air flows freely. The Hambel method doubled the weft, interlocking two layers of fibre in opposing directions, creating a baffle system within the cloth itself. Wind entering one layer was deflected by the opposing thread direction of the second, dissipating its force before reaching the body. The result was a textile that breathed while blocking the penetrating force of mountain wind. In the Alps, this was the difference between frostbite and survival. The colonial labourers had no timber on the exposed ridgelines, only rock, discarded ammunition cordage, and, well, their textile knowledge. Working in teams of 3 or 4 under cover of night, they built what Alpine historians have called abris de tissu, fabric shelters, using mortarless corbelled stone as the base, stacked so it narrowed upward, redirecting wind over rather than through. Against these walls, woven panels were lashed with a running knot system borrowed from North African tent rigging tradition, tightening against gusts and relaxing during calm periods to prevent tearing. It was a living structure, responsive to its environment in ways rigid prefabricated shelters could never be. The floor was layered, gravel drainage, compressed alpine grass, then a horizontal woven panel, creating a vapor barrier that kept ground cold from conducting into sleeping bodies. Men who understood this slept. Men who did not often did not wake up. Open flame was forbidden. A visible fire meant a mortar round within minutes. So the colonial labourers adapted, drawing from traditions predating the war by centuries. Shelters were built deliberately small, 4 men to a structure roughly 2 meters by 1.5. 4 resting bodies in an insulated space raise interior temperature by 8 to 12 degrees above the exterior. The woven walls retain that radiated warmth, and men slept head to center, maximizing the shared thermal envelope. They woke warm enough to work. In the Alps in January, that was a minor miracle. Military records from this period are almost entirely silent on these techniques. The French army documented prefabricated huts and canvas specifications at length, but the parallel infrastructure of survival built by men they considered auxiliary labor went unwritten. Knowledge passed laterally, soldier to soldier, in fragments of Tamazight, Wolof, and French. A Senegalese rifleman learned corbelled stacking from a Moroccan mason. An Algerian corporal taught a Vietnamese laborer to double the weft on a shelter wall repair. In that freezing exchange, something remarkable survived, a living archive of human ingenuity that institutional records entirely failed to capture. Every principle in those Alpine shelters lives in modern bushcraft. The double-weft baffle is the ancestor of today's layered synthetic insulation. The corbelled windbreak is still taught in wilderness survival courses. If improvised woven shelters protected men at -20 on an exposed Alpine ridge in 1916, they can protect you in any emergency you are likely to face today. History forgets the men who did the carrying, the tirailleur who knew how to weave a wall that kept 4 men alive through a February Alpine storm, left no name in the record, but his knowledge survived in every tent, sleeping bag, and survival shelter that came after him. Fieldcraft is the practice of listening to the past and carrying it forward into the present, where it can save a life again. That is what we do here on Fieldcraft Chronicles. We remember so you can survive. If this episode taught you something, share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe to Fieldcraft Chronicles for new episodes every week and drop a comment telling us which technique you're taking into your own practice. History is not behind us. It is waiting to be used. Subscribe, share, carry the knowledge forward.